Hi, everybody. Welcome back to HR. Are you listening? This episode is full of insightful information for you, the person who is interested in leadership, mindfulness, and strategy. And so today I want to introduce this person, someone that I actually admire. This human being has introduced me to another world of empowerment, not only for females, but just in general to the community. This someone also puts a lot of effort to her company, to her work. She's very ethical, something that I feel as though aligns perfectly with my values. As you guys know, it's all about continuous learning, empowering, but more than anything else, being ethical with what you do at work. That being said, let me introduce, guys, this beautiful human being, Nicole Donnelly.
You got it. You got it, girl.
Welcome.
Oh my gosh, it's delighted. I'm delighted to join you today, Marta, and be on your show. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. The last time you and I chatted, we had such an amazing conversation. I love the work that you do. I love your passion. I love the questions that you ask. I think you ask such great questions that really help us get to the meat and the heart of what issues are and try to figure out solutions to them, especially in business and HR. And I love that you're not afraid to ask them. So I'm ready. I'm ready for all your questions. I can't wait. I know this is going to be a juicy conversation and I'm loving it.
Yeah, honestly, I'm more than anything grateful that you take time to be here and share some valuable knowledge. I think that the best way for us to learn and everybody to grow as human beings and professionals is to be sharing a little bit of the gems that we have acquired with experience. But let's not continue this chit chat and let's go straight to it. Let me ask you to introduce yourself. So who is Nicole?
Ooh, who is Nicole Donnelly? Okay, so I'm looking at my vision board right now and it sums me up in on my vision board. I have this who am I becoming? And I would say who I am is someone who makes really bold, brave choices. So I am the founder of Hello Moxie, which is a startup. We started as a podcast and are now a startup and are really focused on building leadership and mentorship programs specifically for women in tech. So I have a prior experience working in both the manufacturing industry and the tech industry and e-commerce as a marketing agency owner. And so I know firsthand the challenges of what it's like to work in a male dominated industry as a woman. And through that experience, I felt very inspired to make a significant pivot and move away from my marketing agency and launch this startup, which was very uncertain and scary. And now that I'm in it, I just adore it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I would say that I love being a founder. I love starting new things. I love to write. I'm in the middle of writing a play right now that I just love. I have my first Zoom reading this month with actors. I can't believe it. I'm a mom of two beautiful girls and they inspire me every day. The work that I do is really in many ways for them because I want to create a future for them where they can lead with Moxie and they don't have to deal with some of the challenges that a lot of women have had to face socially and in the workplace. So I'd say that sums me up. What else can I tell you about me? I loved Pilates and I love to travel. And I'm just I'm just curious. I'm very curious. I love to learn about people, places as much as possible. I love learning about the world. So yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful introduction. It gives me a little bit of who you are as a person and also, what you are doing with your career path. So you guys know this is not only someone who is career driven, but also someone who also that tries to continually grow as a person. And I think that's something that we tend to align a lot. Not to mention that curiosity that we have to get to know more. In this episode, something that I'm looking forward to or having this conversation and to learn more about the mindfulness. I just want to say that I think that's something that we talk a lot in companies, in leadership roles and whatnot, but really just getting to know more about that especially in your situation where you're at, right? Like in terms of like a founder, a startup. And I think that adding that element of mindfulness or talking about it says a lot about who you are, because it's something that a lot of times people say they know about it, but they don't really, tell the story, right? And so your stories that you're going to be sharing today, a little bit about your experience, is aligned to that. I think that gives the audience a good idea of how mindfulness actually can be implemented, how it can be used. But I mean, that's just my thought, guys. I don't know any better because I don't know the
What?
story. So
Yeah.
let Nicole start and please take it away.
Mm. So my earliest memory is when I was 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, I can remember this vividly. I'm on a speedboat, I'm on a lake, and it's a beautiful day, and my dad walks over and he picks me up and he's smiling. But then my heart starts to race, and I got this pit in my stomach, and immediately my body's telling me, like, something's wrong. And I remember telling him no. I remember saying, "No, stop." And in that moment, he laughed, and then he tossed me over the boat. And this is the earliest memory I have. And so I remember being in the water. I didn't know how to swim. And so I just remember like trying to fight my way back to the boat. And he was waiting for me and he pulled me back in and he's smiling like this was a game for him. But for me, from that experience, I learned very early that like I needed to ignore or it wasn't safe for me to, um, you know, trust myself, that there was someone else's voice that was more important than my own. And so over my life, I developed a pretty bad pattern of workaholism where my way of kind of like dealing with any, challenges that I had as a child was just like work through it and just to numb through working. And because of that, I woke up really in a terrible period of burnout many years later in the middle of my marketing agency where I woke up and I was just miserable and I found myself in a pretty unhealthy business partnership. And I recognized the same pattern that I had as a child where I was just basically self-abandoning and ignoring kind of those warning signals that my body was telling me that warned me of danger because I had never really learned to trust them. And I remember I had an executive coach at the time and she asked me once, she said, "Nicole, do you ever spend time with yourself?" And I remember laughing. I remember thinking, like, what would I do? What would I do with myself? Like, it didn't make sense to someone like me who is just very much focused on do, go, achieve, accomplish, fight. That was my MO. And so I remember she's like, "What if you just spent time with yourself?" And I was like, "What would I do?" And she's, "What if you just did nothing?" And I remember kind of being frightened by that. And when I first started practicing it, I remember feeling like I would sit and I would try to get answers. Like I would feel like I needed to get these answers from myself. I'd sit there and I'd get really restless and I couldn't stay for very long. It was very uncomfortable. But the more that I did it, the more I would literally go out and sit in my hammock and do absolutely nothing. Sometimes I would sit there for hours. And the more that I spent time practicing stillness and really paying attention to, it's really as simple as what was my body telling me? Did I have a pit in my stomach? Was I feeling some sensations in my fingers and in my hands? Did I have tightness in my chest? Was there pressure in my head? Like very basic, like physical manifestations of what was going on within me. And instead of just like paying attention to the sensations and letting them go, which is very common in Western mindfulness, right? You're taught to just bring awareness to the body and then move on. I got really curious. I started getting really curious and really starting to ask questions. What is this tightness in my chest really telling me? What is this pit in my stomach telling me? And really trying to understand and reconnect with my body, that connection that had been broken when I was a young child. So, it was like a journey for me to just like really rediscover who I was and start to develop that self-trust.
Let's take a step back because I
Mhm.
talked about already mindfulness, how excited I am. And
Yeah.
but people might not necessarily know what is mindfulness. So
Yeah.
can we start from clarifying the
Yeah.
terminology, what it means and what's all about? What's the fuzz about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's definitely rooted in ancient Eastern philosophy, right? So it started with Buddhism and yoga traditions are really, really entrenched in this, original embodied mindful way of being, where you're really truly connecting with the physical sensations of your body and tuning in and sitting still and really listening to what those sensations are telling you. So this is like this very traditional Eastern way of being. And then what's happened over time is, to me, there's many different definitions of mindfulness. So there's also Western mindfulness, which is an adaptation of this traditional Eastern philosophy, which is all about kind of like regulation. Like when you feel something very common that people do is box breathing, for example. So it would be using breathing exercises to calm or regulate your nervous system to get it back to a state where it's relaxed and, you're not your nervous system isn't on alert or, in fight or flight mode, right? And so it depends on whether you're thinking about Eastern mindfulness or Western mindfulness, but both of those modalities are similar but very different in terms of how they operate. So yeah, so that's what I would say. It's mindfulness is all about like getting clarity on what the physical experience is that you're having in your body and really connecting with that mindfully
I
as
think
you're
like
in as
something
you're
about
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say some so I did a master's my first master program in global entrepreneurial
Yeah.
management, and I took a class, or I think I took a class about mindfulness, or I did a project on mindfulness. So I did a lot of research. Actually, it was my thesis for
Mm.
that master. So I did a thesis related mindfulness and companies, like the relationship with companies and how mindfulness help employees to be better, performers in overall, or how you start teaching these skill sets to them to help them be better at work. But I want to add that the way I perceive mindfulness ultimately comes down to being aware of yourself. So a lot of self-awareness, a lot of emotional intelligence. And a lot of times when you say about like stillness and staying calm and regulating yourself, I think that's true. But I think also being mindful, it steps further. It steps to you asking yourself, being curious to get to know yourself better.
Uh-huh.
And to a point where sometimes I think being mindful is being aware that of your surroundings, being aware that how you trigger or how your relationship with others affect, there's ripple effects, right? And so I recently discovered how my way of being affects positive or negative people's behavior, and whether I intentionally or without intent or subconsciously basically might be triggering people without me being aware. Not because me being mean to them, or rather than because my way of being or my behaviors affect them. And so being aware of, I think that's something that I've realized. At least that's how my approach is. And I think a lot of times when we talk about mindfulness, we do a lot of like meditation, and yeah, it is important to like those like implementation of mindfulness, like tangible breathing exercises,
Mhm.
meditating. But there is a core aspect of it that is intangible. And then the tangibility of learning your emotional intelligence, learning how to be self-aware. And the one way I've realized, at least that helps me, is experiencing new things.
Uh,
I don't know about you, but I would like your thoughts on this, because the way I experience mindfulness in my life, it's when I put myself in the most awkward positions or more uncomfortable positions. You put yourself in uncomfortable situations and you associate it with something that originally started with, but then you kind of chase that uncomfortableness because it triggers you in a way, huh, what is this? So I would like your thoughts on this, the intangibility versus the tangible aspects of mindfulness, just to make it more like holistically speaking, this terminology.
Hmm. Interesting. So I would say, like, when I think of mindfulness, I think of presence. What you described is just you're present in the moment, right? So when I go outside, for example, and sit on my deck, instead of being like in my head thinking about what happened in the past or what I need to be doing in the future, I'm very focused physically, somatically on what's happening right in front of me. And what you just described about how when you're in a new experience, in some ways it forces you to do that because everything around you in your environment is new and you're having to process all of it. So it's that sense of presence that being in a new environment forces you to go into, right? And so like that's what I think of as like as leaders, as people, as humans, the more that we can practice presence, being like truly being present, like in this moment with you, this conversation with you, I'm trying as much as possible to be present. What am I seeing? What am I hearing from you? Like, what are my senses telling me? What can I taste, smell, feel? The more that we can live in this fully embodied presence where it's not just our mind that we're aware of and what's going on in our mind and awareness of the thoughts in our head, but actually what's going on in our bodies. It's that integration of the body and the mind together that is when you can truly fully be present. And I think sometimes with mindfulness, sometimes there's a tendency, especially with Western mindfulness, to focus so much on like, how can we be aware of our thoughts and start to become better at controlling or managing our thoughts, rather than how can we know what our body's feeling somatically, integrate that with what our thoughts are, and then create a much more embodied kind of like integration or understanding of what's actually happening in our environments. And I think that integration between the body and the mind in that presence is really what allows us to tap into deep self-trust and deep discernment, which is what we need as leaders to like lead fully and creatively and compassionately and with clarity, is to be able to live in that presence. And the only way that we can really fully do that is if we slow down. Like, I think one of the biggest challenges with our economic system, it's a beautiful system. Capitalism is amazing, but capitalism rewards productivity and speed. It always has. It has since the dawn of its existence is, you're rewarded by how much you can produce and how fast you can do it. And I think we're reaching a point now where like that's not going to work anymore because we have artificial intelligence that can move quicker and more fast than humans. I think there's a real opportunity for us as humans to really start to lead with our humanity. Like, how can we lead with the thing that makes us most human rather than trying to continue to move faster, quicker, more efficiently? How can we slow down and really focus on the thing that makes us distinctly human, which is our bodies? Like, artificial intelligence will never have a body. It's the thing that makes us distinctly different. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us as leaders to actually, this is like a leadership skill, is to practice embodied mindfulness and really start to connect with our bodies in a way that we've never been taught before. Because there's so much wisdom there. I mean, if you think about like when you're fully present, Marta, and you're outside and you're experiencing a sunset and you're experiencing the colors of it and the energy of it, it's like, it's a full body experience. You can feel it tingling in your body. Your heart expands. You can start to feel this sense of awe, being part of something bigger than yourself. That is like a lived bodily experience that you can only have if you have a body, right? Like it's just lived, or like the experience of hearing a child's laughter, right? When you hear a child's laughter, what it does to your body and how it lights you up and how that kind of creates a wisdom within you. Like there's a wisdom that comes from that lived experience that can only be had when you're fully present in it and can experience it with all of your senses that an AI can never fully understand. So that's where I
Yeah.
think is like, how can we slow down and experience? The only way to do it is to slow down, right? If we keep moving fast, stuck on our computers, like rushing through our days, how are we going to like really be able to savor and enjoy and know what those true experiences feel like, to gain that wisdom?
Yeah. I think I have some struggles when we start talking about leadership and the expectations we provide with leadership.
Oh,
First and foremost, because I think like the whole concept of leadership roles, like, or leadership titles, right? Like I'm in a leadership position because I'm the CEO, or I'm a
oh,
leadership role, or because I'm a manager or a supervisor. I don't, I think we get stuck into those expectations. Like, a manager needs to get this skill set to prepare to become the CEO.
oh,
The founder needs to work on this. And I kind of like go against this idea because I feel like this is not leadership. This is everybody as humans. Um, Actually, if you look into like how the power struggles that leaders have, is because a lot of times in team work environments, there's always one or two people who really influences the employee relationship.
Mm.
And when we look into changes, right? So you're in a company and you want to change or adapt or implement a change, we look for the people who get the buy-in in us, right? So I'm like, hey, Nicole, I want to do this. I know Nicole has a big influence on the employees, on her team members. And so Nicole has no leadership title or role, but she is a leader, not because she wanted to be, not because she knows any better, but it's because her natural way of being. And so if we want to move things into the work environment, if we want to change things in the work environment, most of the time, the work that it's required comes down into the employees. The normal employee that goes 9 to 5, whether they like their job or not, but there's always that few people in the work environment that you can know that if I say this to this person and this person believes in me and agrees with me, more likely than not, the change will potentially happen smoother versus not me not having their support.
Mm.
And so strategically, now we're entering to the strategic world on here, is that why we focus only on leaders titles or leadership roles to, hey, this is what we need to foster, when in reality we need to foster this mindfulness with all employees, everybody. Not only this, it's important at the end of the day because ultimately the idea of enabling or providing the skill sets to these people who eventually are gonna outrun the
Wow.
CEOs or the leaders, they will still need to get it at some point. Why we don't start the process so early? It's kind of like a baby. Why we're not teaching our babies mindfulness since day one? I
Mm.
mean, I don't have kids. You get my point. So why we don't
Yeah.
have that mindset? Why we have to only focus right now? And I'm asking you because you're a business owner. Like when we
Mm.
talk about these topics, leadership, it's only viewed as those who are in a power position. But the power position is so subjective because in reality, you could have a lot of power and you could be
Mm.
no. I'm just saying, I'm just,
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I would say I think the reason why the focus is so much is on leaders is because, to be honest, let's be honest, most leaders are struggling to be great leaders. Like, it's not easy to be a great leader. It takes a lot of work and self-management to be able to be an effective leader. So I think that the reason why the focus is so much on, like, how can we help the existing leaders do a better job is because they need a lot of help. Well, because how can they guide the younger generation? Like, how can we truly, like, expect the people that are rising up to be strong leaders if they don't have strong mentorship to look to, if they don't have a strong role model?
but I'm gonna,
Yeah,
I'm
come on,
sorry,
bring it. Yeah.
but I disagree because you didn't,
Yeah.
you become a good leader regardless of the leadership above you. And the fact that you said that you were burned out in the past, the fact that you said, hey, I needed to do something different. Leadership changes comes within when you realize that you need to be a better, to show up better for your employees, to show up better for your family. And it comes with the whole idea of values and morals and ethics and whatnot. But why cannot be simultaneously? Why cannot we, yes, start working on our leaders who are present, but also spread that knowledge that we are already spending money on our leaders and also provide it to our employees? Isn't it the best way to empower people? Because one of the issues that we're having now in America is that there are not succession plannings. There are no people prepared to be the next CEO. But then I ask why there's only in the list of CEOs are like 5 people. But then we ask why there's no professionals prepared.
Mhm.
I don't know. You tell me why we have to wait for them to be in that position when we could start building some of the soft skills early stages in a way that actually, in the end of the day, I don't think there's evidence based on this, but I'm going to assume
Yeah.
that if we prepare them at some point in time early and start giving them this low key one-on-one mindfulness, low key one-on-one leadership trainings and expose them to this,
Yeah.
they're more likely than not be more successful. And yes, maybe their leaders are not prepared, but by the time that they get to that position of CEOs, they will not be prepared either. At least if we provide some sort of acknowledgement that we should not only focus on those leadership titles or roles, but also focus on those leadership people that already have showcase or at least try,
Yeah.
maybe just like that, it would smoothen out. And I also, my theory is if you teach an employee about mindfulness and leadership skills and whatnot, they may be maybe just slightly, maybe more empathetic to their leaders.
Yes, I would agree with that. So I love this so much. I would say, like, to your question earlier about why this, I think you mentioned earlier, like, why are we only
Focusing.
focusing on existing leaders? And I think what I shared is like my reasons for why I think it is the way it is, not that I agree with it. So I
Oh,
don't necessarily agree that should be the case. In fact, what I think is the ideal scenario is like this joint model of leadership where we are creating scenarios where senior leadership can have opportunities to mentor the younger people who are rising up. And what that does is like research has actually shown that when someone is given an opportunity to mentor someone else, it's a huge learning experience and growth opportunity for them as a leader for both parties. So there's like this symbiotic, beautiful relationship that happens when you create a mentorship relationship in any way. There's a lot of different mentoring. You can have peer to peer mentorship. You can have reverse mentorship, even where someone younger is mentoring someone older. But the point is to try to get into as many of these kinds of like mentoring opportunities as possible wherever you are in your career, because it's through that community, like accountability, growth, that you're both going to grow together in new and rich ways. So I completely agree with you that there needs to be like a new way of thinking about leadership so that it's this kind of like combined joint community effort. Like in my example, I would have never started practicing embodied mindfulness if I didn't have a coach who mentored me and introduced me to it and said, "Hey, I think this might be something that would help you." I would have still been on my own trying to just like push through. And I look back in my life at many points that the thing that helped me really kind of like take whatever next step I needed is because I had someone else who could be a mirror to me to say, "Hey, not this is what you need to do, but what if you were to just to be a witness, to help me look inside and help me find the trust within myself to be able to make that next step and figure out what decision I need." Not that they're making it for me or telling me what to do, but just helping me identify where I might need to do some get curious, right? Figure out what's next. So, yeah, because you're absolutely right, there's a gap on both sides, and the way to bridge that gap is just more structured
more
mentorship.
unity.
Yeah.
There's a streamline. I think they're very intertwined. I mean, granted, I feel as though leadership, it's very complex, and I will never take this away because when you are in a position of making decisions, it's not only your livelihood, but it's other people's livelihood. There's a lot of responsibilities, and there's a lot of things that employees will never be able to fully understand, and it's okay. They're not supposed to understand. And the funny thing is, this is the whole concept of what I think is you're not looking to be liked. You're looking to be respected. You're looking to lead and be okay with that reality. The reality is that people who are sitting on the top will will be always be lonely because there are few people that will understand what they're going through unless you get together with other people who are CEOs or who are business owners. Like the entrepreneur world is very, very caring. I would say this entrepreneur world is very caring because all entrepreneurial people try to be there for each other because they know how hard it is. But I think I feel like because of AI is moving so fast, it's kind of, I feel like kind of like COVID vibes. Back in the day, COVID, we focused so much on a lot of things and we forgot about the employees. I legit think about, remote and work from home and all this stuff. And people now be like, well, it's all about work from home. I'm like, what are you talking about? Do you know how many jobs require people to be present, physically present? Meanwhile, we're fighting for white collar, and this comes down to like another whole rabbit hole. But I'm just gonna say, while we fight for white collar privileges and rights and what work best, we forgot that a huge chunk of our work environment is also present.
Mhm.
Going to the office, going to the manufacturer. So when I think about leadership, it's a dilemma in my head of yes, we're focusing on the people that need support, but these people also need support. I try to give grace to the employees because they don't know any better how to be a leader. but I'm not also giving them the opportunity to understand what
Mm, mm.
lightly of what it means to be a leader, because the only thing that I'm giving them is I'm a leader, I struggle, da da da, I need assistance. When maybe we educate them a little bit better what it means to be a leader and create some sort of empathy. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
I was going with this thought. I'm
I
sorry.
love what empathy is the word that comes to me. I love what you shared earlier in the conversation about how employees need to have empathy for the business owners and the executives. It goes both ways. So how can we create more empathy in the workplace, right? What is it that's keeping us like, because what you just said was very empathetic. Like you were like very inclusive about thinking about the fact that there are other people that have to go into the office, and how can we start to think about what their experience is like, and what, that's empathy. That's like putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. Well, how can we create more empathy in the workplace? And I think it really comes back to this idea that so many of us, okay, so I'm going to go down this, I'm going to take you down the path, but just bear with me. 70% of us, the World Health Organization reports that 70% of us have experienced trauma in our lives. It's very common. Most people have experienced trauma. What happens when people experience trauma is your body goes into fight or flight mode, and your amygdala takes over, your stress hormones spike, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. So there's a disconnect between your higher reasoning, your prefrontal cortex. And if you're in a situation where you're repeatedly encountering trauma, then your dorsal vagal system just completely shuts down and you go numb. So your body starts to literally not feel like it used to feel, because it's a protection. It's a brilliant compromise the body makes, where in order to protect you, you start feeling less. And so I think what happens is that so many of us are in this numb state and don't even realize it, frankly. And what happens when we're in a numb state is we have a tendency to become workaholics, work so hard, push ourselves so hard. And when you're in a numb state, it's very difficult for you to feel deeply anything: sadness, grief, fear, anger, gratitude, joy. You're just like numb. So if we could get ourselves to a point where we can start to reconnect with our bodies and our minds through practicing mindfulness, what happens is we start to feel the full range of all these human emotions. So we start to feel sadness instead of running from it, right? And being afraid of feeling it and not wanting to feel it because we think it's bad. We allow ourselves to actually sit and feel the sadness. And when we can actually feel when we actually allow ourselves to feel sad when something outside of our control happens, someone dies that's very close to us. And instead of numbing out through whatever addiction, we actually sit and feel the sadness and know that like this feels really awful, and let yourself cry and let yourself lay down and feel awful about it. What does that do? That helps us develop this muscle of empathy. Because we're able to feel that sadness, we know what it feels like. We can start to relate better to other people who might be feeling something very similar. And so I think that's I think at a deeper level, the challenge is that we're all just like operating in this numbness. So it's very difficult, and it's like below the surface, so people don't even recognize it. And then once we really start to reconnect with our bodies and start to feel these things that we've been trying to bury and cover up, it really allows us to tap into our humanity so that we can start to show up with more compassion, with more clarity, with more creativity, wherever we are, in whatever phase of career or life that we're at. So I really think that's what it comes down to, is just like, how can we stop numbing ourselves? Like we do it all the time on these devices. Like not being afraid of feeling things, because that's where we'll really start to connect with people. And if we can all lead with more empathy, then we will start to think more holistically and inclusively about things.
When you were talking, my brain went strictly to a question. So you talk about traumas and how everybody goes through traumas. I 100% agree. I mean, especially there's different levels of traumas that people
Yeah.
don't even know that they have traumas, but there is a level of trauma. So, question to you. This, I don't even know how to articulate it, but so you said you went through a burnout, you went through all this crazy stuff, and in your experience. So how do we go about this? Because if we
Mhm.
create a work environment that is toxic,
Mhm.
even it's like not not a good work environment. Let's not put toxic, because sometimes
Yeah.
there's companies that they're meh. They're not that good. They're not that bad. They're just have this weird ecosystem that is meh and n- not healthy overall. How do these work environments affect your leadership way of you lead, and simultaneously uh, affects your mindfulness? So if you are in a company that is meh, you're the
Mhm.
leader, you're leading, but you're numb. You're
Well,
practicing mindfulness just to mindfulness at this point in time, based on what I'm understanding, it's to help leaders to be more self-aware, more mindful, be more clear. But uh, mm, mm, empathy and all these other what we start bringing to the table, that requires looking externally, looking
mhm.
outside of the window. So how how companies will go about this when they have created this work environment that is not necessarily healthy, probably triggering people's triggers by accident,
Yeah.
and how leaders who lead, who are trying to practice this mindfulness, work. What's the strategy? Because
Mm.
the
Yeah,
work
great question.
environment is influenced by the leaders leading.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if the leaders leading in a way that they are mindful, but they're mindful of themselves, that have not built that empatheticness point of view. I don't know if that is clear. I'm not sure if I'm expressing
Yeah.
thought process or my ideas right now, because this is something that immediately my head just went.
Yeah. No, you're thinking about,
Right
like,
now.
how do we practically apply these practices so that people in the workforce can so that we can break this pattern, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that it's like it goes back to what we talked about earlier, like with the mentorship. It takes a joint effort from the ground up and from the top down. Like, you can't rely on one or the other to be responsible for creating the change that needs to happen. So, first of all, it starts with education. Like, frontline employees need to be educated about mindfulness and really start to learn to how they can start trusting themselves again and reconnecting with their physically felt experience so that they can integrate the mind body. And then and the leaders, honestly, they're the like, let's be real. Most people that make it into a leadership position have significant traumas and they're struggling and more numb than anyone, to be fully frank. So they also need education and awareness and an understanding of the gravity of the situation. But the challenge, and if they're educated on both sides and they can, like, together start to learn and practice this mindfulness, which it's so simple, Marta. It's like literally just, can you just take 20 to 30 minutes a day to just sit and not do anything? Like, it's basic. It's not like rocket
Is
science.
no. But is it simple?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, that's a fair question. It's very difficult for people who are so used to going to just actually slow down and feel comfortable. You're right. That's fair. That's a fair argument. I think it seems simple, but it's deceptively not because of how our society is.
So implementing mindfulness, to my answer, I guess, because you understood me, because I was here rambling. Just implement mindfulness in both ends would close the gap to a point where the work environment naturally will be healing itself. I'm asking, like, that's kind of that's
Yes, I think
implementation idea.
yes, that's what I would say is, like, literally intentionally practicing slowing down and being still. And then the other thing that I think is key part of this that I haven't figured out, I'm gonna be honest, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that our economic system frankly rewards financial success, right? We reward profitability, top line growth, but what's not rewarded is the how, right? So it's like like this person's going to be rewarded for reaching these financial goals even if they are have no empathy and have no team building or collaborative self-management, skill. They struggle with those skills. But man, they can get results, but it's the how, right? And I think the challenge is like, how can we shift our system and evolve to like like kind of like this like greater, stronger sense of capitalism where the value that we're creating isn't just in what we're producing and the financial numbers, but the value is in the humanity that's produced, right? Like, how can we start to reward that? Because if leaders are rewarded based on how well they collaborate, how humble they are, how much mentorship they provide rather than just like, oh, we our profitability was, 25% EBITDA this year. That would force a change, right? Because the leaders who don't meet those aren't rewarded for those things are naturally through attrition, it's going to happen. So like in a perfect world, it would be like, how can we systemically change the system so that what's rewarded isn't just the financial, but also more importantly, the human?
So
Yeah.
I'm laughing because in my previous podcast, the last episode, the guy that I was talking, he talks about performance and how he view performance. And because we're focused on performance only, and
Mhm.
when we talk about performance, you only talk about the outcome rather than the process itself, the
Yeah.
journey itself. We were actually having this conversation about there's two ways to go about it at the end of the day. Like you have the macro perspective. The goals gives us orientation. The goals gives us an idea where the path is supposed to lead, right? The outcomes. But then he says, performance uh, also has a micro perspective, which is how you go through that process, was the journey process. So
Ooh.
while we're so focused on the macro perspective of the goals, we have left behind the micro perspective, which is actually the journey itself. And the journey itself brings so much richness ultimately. And when we start having this two lenses, the macro and the micro. So we look into the outcomes, but we also focus and we provide pressures and create accountability in the
Micro.
journey itself. Allows us to kind of regulate and be more, oddly enough, more
Yeah.
mindful of the process itself. And so I said to him, I agree because I am someone who always walks on the journey. Granted, outcome says everything, profit says everything, ratio says everything. Business in the business world, my outcomes is everything. But as a person, I genuinely focus always on my journey.
Mm,
And sometimes
mm,
people are like, why are you so complicated? Why you go to the harsh path? Like you go and you take the longest path ever, and when there's a shortcut that will give you to the same results. And I'm like, is it?
yeah.
Because then I didn't do the learning curve. I didn't do the experiences.
Mm.
I wouldn't know any better. Granted, nobody wants to struggle. Nobody wants to do the hard work. But in my head, I was trying to be like, if you're not mindful of your journey, when you get to the goal, you do like, okay, I got it. And then what? What
Yeah.
did I learn? What did I gain? Nobody's gonna applaud you because nobody cares. The economical system is gonna always be there. We're always gonna look for the people that produce more. We're always gonna value the person that produce more. It's up to us, the leaders, oddly enough, to put pressure on emphasizing the importance of the journey. So I think to your question, I think that we need to leaders, especially us, hold ourselves accountable and be like, what type of work environment I promote? Yes. Do I promote people and I clap hand for people who are providing income to me, helping us build? Yes. But should I promote someone who is making these outcomes, meeting the goals in a very questionable manner? One of the main reasons why managers fail at being a leaders in their career at the beginning is because they are good at getting those numbers.
Mm.
Terrible with people skills. They're
Yeah.
terrible at management. But you have here these people going up the ladder very quickly. We cannot change the system, but we can change the way we approach the system, which is us in our businesses. And that's why, like, a lot of times people do the social enterprises and they talk about social
No.
enterprises and how they're very questionable and they're not successful. That is not true. Patagonia is a good
Yeah, I
example.
was gonna say, look at Patagonia. Like,
Yeah.
that was exact example I was gonna use.
So
For
I
sure.
think your question is the how is more how we leaders start looking into this both lenses and start promoting that idea. We do value outcome, but we
Yeah.
also in the scale, we also look at the journey. And the journey comes down to what behaviors you promote. Because if you're promoting a unhealthy competition, that doesn't help me because that unhealthy competition that you bring into the table will lead to potential.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're onto something there because as leaders, as business owners, if we can, and that's truly the epoch of leadership to say, no, we're going to create our own new way of working, right? We're going to create this new and evolved way where we are going to reward the journey, right? We're going to figure out a way to reward their journey, not just the outcome. And what happens then is then your company naturally just starts to attract top talent because everybody's going to want to work for an organization that works that way. Let's be honest. Like, who wouldn't want to work there? So over time, like, hope is that there will be this natural gravitation to more of these, like, companies that are really focused on sustainability and people centered. But
Yeah.
I don't
I,
know.
I was I think I was gonna say that the thing is with this type of mentality is that you're taking the long route
Yeah.
because you're not gonna be able to get the income or the
Mhm.
amount of money that you want as fast. And we
Correct.
are impatient. I want to end up my thought in this one strategically. How we strategically how strategically we start adding these concepts of leadership and mindful uh, behaviors overall in the company.
My thinking on that is what if we shift the focus from being so focused on the outcome of the reward, and if we were to like focus on the journey and enjoy the journey? Like,
Mhm.
what if that was the reward? What if the reward was knowing that tomorrow I mentored Sally for an hour and we had a really great experience, and I was able to transfer some knowledge to her that she didn't have before of a way she could handle a problem. And now because of that, she's gonna be able to, help this client with this problem. And so the reward is not necessarily like it kinda goes back to what we were talking about earlier with presence, is what if we can really live in the present moment and that be the reward? And really focus in a little bit less on what's gonna happen next year, next quarter. I mean, those things are important, don't get me wrong. I don't wanna, like, negate them, but I think what there may be rebalancing a little bit of, like, yes, we wanna be looking at those things, but if we focus more on being present in the moment with the people in our world that we have influence over now, and how can we show up fully for them and find joy in those moments, then that becomes the reward rather than it being like, well, let's just wait until 20 years from now, but can we let the presence itself be the reward?
You know what? I'm so sorry. I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna put this in a pause because I want to talk about. I'm not gonna do it, but I'm just gonna mention. Doesn't it this align with the Maslow hierarchy? If you're in a survival mode, if you're working in a
Mhm.
company that barely paid you, you're not thinking about mindfulness. You're thinking about how
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that, and this plays a big factor for blue collars, depending on the
Yeah.
company, but where they don't get paid enough, they don't have enough money to get even the health care that they need, a good health care. When you're talking about this idealistically, I agree. But then I'm thinking the systems that we have in place in
Mhm.
terms of economical
Yeah.
statuses, and you add the Maslow hierarchy ideologies into this conversation, which I honestly think that is the one thing that I really apply to my life. I start thinking, which level are you, Marta, and which level you're talking to? Because if you're talking to
Mhm.
someone who's in level 4, they're not thinking about kumbaya, my lord, let take a thing. They're not thinking, "Let me sit down in my hammock." They're thinking
I gotta get dinner on the table because 'cause I'm a single mom and I've got 2 kids, and yeah.
I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, idealistically,
Yep.
that's true." But for us, for society to be in that stage, we need to address the basic needs that are being neglected. We need to address basics of leadership, which is how the racial payments. That's why I said I don't want to talk about this because we go through another topic. But these are topics that, when we talk about mindfulness and being present, it also you need to acknowledge that your pay ratio, it's 10 times, 20 times a ridiculous amount of time versus what the employee from the minimum wage who barely has money. So I think this is challenging completely how leaders even see their own companies, how they perceive their responsibilities and how they hold themselves accountable. Mindfulness for us works well, but and that's one of the challenges of my own argument. One of my weaknesses actually is that when you start presenting mindfulness to these employees, they'll tell you what you how you they will tell you or they will react the same way that how you reacted to your coach. Huh? What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
it sounds very hooey. But if you think about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, this is incredibly basic. It's literally self-care. You know, like it doesn't take any money. You don't have to invest any money in stillness or learning how to slow down. And there's not like a required thing where you need to sit on a hammock for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, right? Like it doesn't have to be that way. It's literally about practicing presence. You know, and anyone, regardless of where you're at in your career or socioeconomic status, when can benefit from that skill.
I will just add this. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But how
I
I'm
love
gonna
it, Marta.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, right. Bring it on, girl.
How how no, hold on. Let me rephrase this. You're speaking with wisdom and knowledge and understanding of this topic. So you
Mhm.
broke that ceiling, you broke that mindset, you broke that ideologies that you have been attached forever. So we're having a conversation like it's walking the path. We're going this
Mhm.
and forward, and you get me, and I get you. And our realities align because we have experienced it, we have lived
Yeah.
it, we have exposed our mindsets to go beyond the obvious. Where now we start seeing the issues, society issues. Um, and so we talk like they should know better. Just how when people talk about internet, I'm like, well, you should know better. Go educate yourself. There's internet everywhere. You should know, how to read and
Mhm.
and I'm like, no, what are you talking about? First and foremost, just because you have internet access doesn't mean that you know how to use internet. Not to mention, we start talking about AI and how marketing is working nowadays, and how they sway you, and how you start reading bad news and non-existing and fake news, and you don't even know. There's no critical thinking. So, yes, you're right. In terms of the Maslow hierarchy, in our deeper understanding, because we have broken the patterns of how we view reality, because we have challenged reality, and how we're challenging reality, and how we are trying to change the reality in terms of how we play the game with the economy, capitalist economy to be more specific. Yes, we understand it. But you know who doesn't understand it? The person who doesn't know any better, the person who is trapped into the ecosystem, the person who still lives in that ecosystem. So if you look into it, I see it as we broke the ceiling, we could see the light, but they're down there. Actually,
Yeah.
have you read the allegory of the cave?
No. Okay, now you're giving me homework. I gotta read the Allegory of the Cave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
I've never read the Allegory of the Cave, Marta.
Okay. Do you want
I
me
will
to read
read
it
it
you,
just
or you
for
want
you
me to
and I
let
will
you
report
be?
back.
Huh?
I will read it just for you and report back. Yeah.
Okay. So this is from Plateau. I'm sorry. I was just trying to make sure. So Allegory of the Cave from Plateau. I read this very young in school, to be more specific, and it stuck me for the rest of my life. Actually, it changed the way I view life forever.
Mm.
And so I don't know why I'm telling you this. So this is the thing. You and I are outside of the cave. You and I see that there's more than the cave. 99% of the time, people are inside the cave. And I'm not trying to get in the needs of the weeds of this because it's very philosophical. And we're entering to this whole ideas, but it does actually it's related to mindfulness and how we start viewing things and how we being present. But the idea is like when we're having this arguments or conversations about leadership and how what we could do and we do better, we need to remember that where are we in our life? Where are we in our stage? And so we are outside of the cave. We saw light, we saw wisdom, we saw knowledge, we have all this vast understanding, and yet we don't have enough understanding. But when we come inside the cave and we provide information to someone, um, like, hey, let's give us mindfulness. This is something simple. The challenge is not how simple it is. The challenge is break a pattern that they don't see. The challenge is to put them a mirror and say, hey, like you are tied to this cave because you're not seeing what really it really is. This is a cave. This is not a nice, beautiful area. You're tied to the system. The system is set for us to be tied, and you're not going to break the system because the system's not going to change. What you can change is how you view the system, how you set the mindset to be better at the system, and how you could provide a better quality of life despite being in the system. So I could still be in the cave. The question is, how do I change my mindset on how I view the cave? And maybe one day you're able to overcome the cave mindset and you'll be outside in the light. But when you're outside of the light, you realize how things are more complex than what they are. Because now you start looking into all these variables that we have talked about, how leaders required to change their mindset to lead, how they use mindfulness not only for them to be better leaders, but to actually guide their company and do tangible actions that require to provide a better work environment. Because if you're working 45 hours per week and you have triggers in your work, and we're always going to have triggers.
Yeah.
But the idea is like how we mitigate those triggers. And actually, this is controversial because my thought is one of the ways to mitigate triggers is to learn how to have critical thinking conversation,
Yeah.
not running away from them. So, yes, I went to a ramble there, but to the idea is that, yes, you're right. We could present these ideas, but we also need to be mindful of who are we presenting them to and what mindset they are in. Because something for us, it's so simple to stay still. For others, and you have lived it yourself, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it
But
definitely is a lot of work. I can't downplay it because for me, it was very challenging, incredibly
sorry.
challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. It's important to recognize that. And for anyone who's been in any sort of like coercive situation where you didn't even realize that you're in it for a long time until somehow you found your way out of a situation like that. I can understand exactly what you're saying. So, yeah, I don't have the answer to that other than,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
no, it's okay. Like you challenged me and I'm challenged.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the only thing I think you said is that we just have to keep going into the cave and be patient and also try to be very understanding of what that experience is like because we've all been in the cave. Like once it's not like we don't know what it feels like to be in the cave. We've all at some point been in some sort of a cave.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to continuing to like lean into empathy and meeting people where they are with patience and understanding for where they're at. And if they feel that you're truly understanding of them and patient with them, then that will go a lot farther than
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's land this conversation. I sorry I talked more than I normally used to. I got
Right.
inspired for a second because of
I
you.
love it.
You're very thought provoking. You make me think about things, but then my brain goes to like, well, what about this? That's my
Yeah.
actual. This is like Marta on like when I start asking people questions.
I love
But
it. It's so good. I love how critically that you think, and I love that you've challenged me in this conversation. It's important. Mhm.
I try. No, I'm
Yeah.
joking. But so let's land this plane and wrap up this video. And so tell my audience, actually, our audience,
Yeah.
3 highlights of this conversation. I know, guys, this is not our typical video because we went all over the place and we presented this crazy stuff. But I think it's very valuable. I found a lot of food for thought, things for me to actually start thinking about and being more from philosophical mindset to applicable, how we apply things. Let's not just stay in the mindset rather than applying things. So that said, what are your 3 takeaways in this video?
Oh, yeah. I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is Occam's razor. That usually sometimes the simplest option is the one that you should pursue. And I think if you're listening to this and maybe you're lost and you're not really sure what you want to do next with your career, or you're in a job that you hate, or you have a boss who you feel just completely is abusive in some way. And you're just like, what do I do? I think the very simple start is just to start looking within yourself and really take the time not to just start asking, to really try to practice this embodied mindfulness by paying attention to your body and what your mind is, and getting curious about it and understanding what is your mind kind of like telling you in these situations. And the more that you can connect there, you're going to start to develop this self-trust that will help cultivate a natural curiosity within you so that you can gain the confidence to start to really have discernment over what you need to do next. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is like, you have more power than you think you do. I think a lot of times people feel like they're stuck, and that they don't have choice, but you absolutely do have choice and power. And as much as you can try to like really start to develop that, you will realize that more and start to make more like bold, values aligned choices. And I also think it's important to remember what you said about the allegory of the cave, to be honest. That like it's important to meet people where they are with patience. And the way that we can practice that is just really trying to be mindful. The more mindful we can be. And so my invitation to you is to like go outside tonight when the sun is setting and just sit and watch the sunset and just pay attention to what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, what you're touching, what you're tasting, and just savor that moment and pay attention to what you notice as you do that.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I like that last one. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being here, for listening to ramble. And I appreciate you. I think you bring so much to the table. I think, guys, you should check her out. She is someone who believes in empowerment. And I think there's so much value in what you said today. And it is true. Leaders have a challenge right now because society and how things are moving. So let's be more empathetic to those who are in a leadership position and roles. Try to be more understanding. I invite you to think about that. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you, Nicole, again. I appreciate you.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
amazing.
so
So much
yeah,
fun.
bye
Thank you.
guys.